Hey, my name is Mohan, I'm the CMO of Narwhal.
My name is Luca, and I'm the CEO of Narwhal.
Luca, over the past couple of videos, we've covered a broad range of topics when it comes to LLMs and AI. In this video, we're going to talk about RAG. So let's dive deep into it. What is RAG and how useful is it for someone using AI?
So the way that we use LLMs today is through a method called generative AI, which is the ability for an LLM to generate the next word or to generate a blog, for example. It's good to use an LLM as an assistant in that case, but it doesn't have context on, for example, company-specific information like a refund policy, for example. And so you need to essentially feed the LLM this information ahead of time in order to answer your question. The problem becomes when you have so much information, hundreds of thousands of PDFs that you need to feed the LLM, that it could use different information in different circumstances, for example. And so what the best practice is today is to use a RAG model, which is essentially acting like a librarian. So think about your company is this big library, hundreds of thousands of books, and at any point, you as a user might need certain information that's found in a specific book all the way on some shelf. You go up to a librarian, you ask the librarian, hey, what is my refund policy? The librarian knows where to look, pulls that book, hands it over to you. Now you have essentially enough information to answer that question.
Okay, and so in practice, how does that actually work on a step-by-step basis?
So there's two parts. There's a part before this diagram over here, which we'll get to in another video, called vector databases. But the first part is the ingestion phase, and then the second part is actually the retrieval phase. Now, in this video, we're going to cover the second part, which is retrievals, but just a very quick summary of how ingestion works is, imagine the library has a new shipment of books. They come in, they say, hey, these are the 50 books that came in today. The librarian essentially takes those books and sorts it all over the library wherever it makes sense. And so in this case, when we look at a refund policy, for example, the LLM might find 3 or 4 or 5 books that cover the refund policy. And so what the LLM will do is essentially give you all of the 5 books, pass it over into the system prompt or into that first prompt. The LLM will then look at all of that information and intellectually identify which one makes sense and which one doesn't make sense. And then it will generate the final response to you, which is the third step right over here.
And I think a good example we can give on what it looks like when an LLM has access to RAG and when it doesn't is something like when you're doing an exam with an open book versus one without one.
The example that we have here is just that. When you have a closed book exam, which is essentially no RAG, you don't have access to documents, the LLM can sometimes hallucinate. And we covered hallucinations in previous videos. And so RAG is one of the best ways to combat hallucinations. We essentially tell the LLM, don't create any new information, just tell us what you know and what you don't know. And with RAG, the LLM now has access to more information. And if it comes back with this book doesn't exist, then it'll come back and tell you, hey, we don't have the answer to this. But previously in that closed book exam, it wasn't able to do that. Definitely what you don't need RAG for is any sort of general knowledge, anything that you can perhaps find on the internet. Things like famous people, events, how most industries work, right? Those are sort of like the average internet answers. You don't need RAG for that. RAG is for more specific information that is typically domain experience, such as your internal documentations, company policies, customer history, everything that's kind of like proprietary to your company. What we previously used to do is we used to fine-tune the models, which is essentially retraining the models on a company-to-company basis. But that's essentially done once, and then you reuse the same model. The beauty of RAG is on a day-to-day basis, the data changes. So if I were to bring a book to the library today, take it out of the library tomorrow, after tomorrow, that book isn't there to be retrieved. And so here we have some more information on like when you would fine-tune and when you would use RAG. One of the biggest differences is time and cost. Like it's very expensive to fine-tune, quite easy to implement RAG, especially today. You definitely want to implement RAG when your data is constantly changing, like I just mentioned. And you want to use fine-tuning when you have a lot of data that can specifically identify patterns. So this is sort of like your typical like ML use case where you have a bunch of images and then you kind of want to find the patterns intellectually. RAG is more for just like a library situation that I just mentioned. You want to pull information when it's needed. RAG is definitely 80% of the time a good enough system. In the 20% cases that it doesn't make sense, it doesn't give us the output, then maybe fine-tuning is the way to go.
As you mentioned earlier in the video, behind every good RAG system is a vector database,
Yep.
which we're going to cover in the next video. So guys, if you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe to the channel. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, links down in the description below. And you can follow us on LinkedIn as well. We're very active there on a day-to-day basis. And we'll see you in the next video.